Welcome, everyone. I'm Chari Elam with the Bee Supply and also the editor of the Bee Supply Monthly. Oh my gosh, I've got Blake Shook's rival right here in front of me, Kamon Reynolds. It's good to see you again, man.
It's really good to see you again, Sherry. It's been a little while, but it was a lot of fun last time, so I'm looking forward to this one as well.
Excellent, excellent. Well, you know, we talked about you being Blake's rival. Tell us why he's your rival.
Just I mess around a lot, and Blake is a super nice guy, also super accomplished and capable, and I like to do a lot of crazy things, and I've got some pretty big dreams. But Blake has also done a lot of stuff and more than me in a lot of categories. And so I've got to have a rival. I'm a competitive person. So Blake is that person. He's in my age group, and so now
Right.
I've got to compete with that guy. It's going to be a challenge.
Well, my daily life is trying to keep up with him. I assure you, he is a force for sure.
Mhm.
Well, the Bee Supply, our focus is education, and that's why I've asked you back because and being part of the education team with TVS, I'm every day trying to build that library of experts that are talking about good, solid beekeeping techniques and your experiences. And that's why we love to have you back and we'll again.
Thank you.
So the bees, they're doing pretty good this year. I'm gonna say we've done better this year than we did last year, but we're
Good.
in severe drought. What's going on in your area? Not to be so specific to today, but in this quarter, how's it going in your bee yard?
Pretty good. We were starting to get a little bit dry, but thankfully we've gotten a little bit of rain to help offset that. And the goldenrod, wing stem are blooming. There is a good bit of pollen coming in. Also, the ragweed, which is what primarily gives people allergies. Goldenrod is really not the culprit, even though it gets blamed for it.
Right.
But so there's a lot of pollens coming in. Hopefully, the rain has positively affected that. I'm pretty sure that it has, and we're starting to get a little bit of nectar, some goldenrod, and hopefully a little aster will kick in
Mhm.
here in a little bit. And so the main thing that we're seeing right now is an uptake in pollen. But what I would like to say to the folks listening is fall flows are very fickle and they're very weather dependent. Part of the reason they're more fickle than the spring flow, and the spring flow is what we're always talking about as the great time of the year that we look forward to, is because there's a lot less plant diversity in fall. We don't have hundreds of varieties like we do in spring. I mean, there's things like possum haw, HAW. Most people don't even know that plant exists. It's an
I don't know
understory
that.
tree. Yeah,
What
and
is that? What is that?
well, it's a tree that has mottled bark. It's there's a couple different varieties of haw trees, but it produces some nectar and it's an understory tree and they're really fascinating. And so there in springtime, there's just so much diversity. And so even if you miss a flow or two, you still have something typically. In the
Mhm.
fall, most of the fall nectar in my area, even in a good year, is going to happen over the course of around 10 days. And so if your bees aren't ready for it, or if there's a cold spell or a lot of rain or no rain leading up to it, your pollens, if there's no rain, could be very poor for the bees and there won't be as much of it. Or there could be good pollens, but they get rained out.
Mhm.
And so the fall flow is one of the areas that I really feel like beekeepers need to be getting in there. Don't trust it and observe what's going on in the brood nest. Do we have pollen in the frames? Do we
Mhm.
have enough nectar in the frames? And if not, go ahead and feed anyways. Most professional beekeepers I know do not rely on the fall flow.
Well, the quality, and I think you hit the nail on the head. The quality of the pollen is it's subpar. It is not something that grows wonderful babies. I did some pretty deep research on that several years ago as far as what the crude protein content of a lot of the different flowers and plants that were around my area. And you've got a very narrow window, like you said, in spring, that's good. Everything else is just kind of mediocre, not good for raising babies.
It's not. And this is the time of year we need the best babies we've had all year. The more winter bees that we produce, the bigger our cluster will be. And the bigger our cluster is, the more resilient that it is dealing with rough winters. Just kind of give a little more perspective. If you put a scale on a hive in Tennessee, you'll typically find that the honey flow that you make a surplus crop is going to happen. The majority of that surplus nectar is going to come in over an 8-week period at the most. If it's a poor year, it could be over 5 to 6 weeks. If it's an exceptional year, you might get 9 to 10 weeks. That's a very short, abbreviated season. I think we have to understand as beekeepers that our bees have to be ready for this before it hits. And so if you have a weak colony going into a fall flow or any flow, they're just not going to perform well. So this is where and why beekeepers like myself, and I know Blake used pollen patties as well. He uses those, and I use those to beef up the winter bees, and also to feed a little bit prior to the fall flow to try to get a bigger population, because once that fall flow hits, it might only be good for 5 days. And we want those bees to capitalize on that 5 days like there's no tomorrow, because if they don't, there might not be any tomorrow.
There might not be. And truly, exactly right, that building those winter bees now and the nutrition that they get from these patties, that's a real hot topic with some beekeepers that, feed or don't feed pollen patties, and some that have a lot of acronyms behind their name even are not proponents of it. And I think the proof's in the pudding. You can do your own self-study of your own bees, but
You
gosh,
totally can.
we supplement pollen, and also some of our soft sugar bricks that TVS carries. Stan's soft sugar bricks are really a good product. I find that the health of the bees is improved by these products. Now, whether or not, I'm not a scientist. I just look at what I can see, and I trust these of the outcome.
Well, I trust beekeepers who have a lot of experience as well. And the guys that I talk to that are running 10,000 colonies, I was talking to the 80s a few weeks ago, and they're running like 70,000 hives, and they're talking about feeding pollen patties going in to build that winter cluster. And Brent 80 said this. He's like, if I need a statistician to be able to show me the difference in something, then it's not good enough and it's not worth the time. He basically, the old eyeball test typically does the best job. And so I think that's where a lot of these beekeeping companies, especially on the commercial end, either are multi-generational, or like Blake, who learned from someone who had been in the industry and multiple somebodies, and is constantly honing his craft. And so personally, I don't view the pollen patty as a substitute. That's what everybody calls it. It's a supplement, and you cannot sustain bees long term on a pollen patty. If you have 6 months with no pollens and you're just feeding pollen patties, eventually that's just not going to carry them. It won't do it. But if you have an inferior pollen that's missing an amino acid, your pollen patty can supplement that, and then now your bees are able to develop healthier larvae and more of them. So it's a tool, and like any tool, use it improperly, and it's not going to work out too good for you.
That's right. Well, I have the same philosophy. I love that little statement: supplement, not substitute. I may borrow that from you in future articles.
I think I stole it from another beekeeper.
Okay,
so
well,
use away.
in this industry, we just kind of pass things along, right? If it sounds good, we pass it along. No, I agree. It isn't a substitute for good quality, but there's some good products out. I'm so amazed at the amount of work being done in this industry to improve product. I assume it has a lot to do with making the industry money, but it also has to do with making the bees as healthy as we can get them. And I think that they're getting there. The global patties are, that's a good, super good product. And now they're adding rocket fuel to some. Right.
That's a good product right there. And maybe it's not super exciting to some folks, and that's okay. But for me, any person who is investing a lot of work into trying to develop better nutrition for bees, I think we should all be pretty excited about that. The Apis Biologics company, aka Rocket Fuel, they have two products, Biocontrol and Bioactivator. The Bioactivator is the one for the pollen patties. The Biocontrol is for the liquid supplement or liquid feed. And so what it's designed to do is to mimic pollen. And as beekeepers, that is literally our job. The closer we can mimic the benevolent side of nature, not the side of nature that gives you 2 months without any rain.
Right. Or 3 where we are.
Yeah. The closer we can give the bees the most ideal nutrition possible and give them the best case scenario, the better our operation will be, the better our bees will be. And GM Doolittle, who's the father of modern queen rearing, said as beekeepers, we can't defy nature. Some people say that we are, but in actuality, the more that we defy nature, the worse things get for us. We have to find things that mimic and go alongside. And I'm paraphrasing quite a bit, but that was true 100 years ago. It's still true today. And I find that when my bees look the best is when I have done everything I can to try to give them the best case scenario. And that's what we're trying to talk about today. And I try to talk about with my YouTube videos, because some people get into beekeeping and they want to be all natural. And I think that you can be, but you also can't just throw them out there. It's like a new package or a nuke. It's like throwing a kitten outdoors and an area infested with coyotes and all kinds of stuff and
so
going,
here, thrive.
Thrive. And we want you to be natural. Well, sometimes being natural is getting eaten by something. And that's how nature works. Typically something lives by something else dying, and bees are very nutritious for hornets, for assassin bugs, for tanagers. They're an absolute gorgeous bird. They will consume like tons of your bees and wear out your mating yards. Gorgeous red and yellow birds.
Then they deserve the coined phrase of bee eater, don't they?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen as many as 40 in my personal yard, and you could just
think you're a buffet, Kamon. You're a buffet.
I had 60 hives here at that point, and they were honey production worthy, and they were just pow all day long. You could just watch one fly from a branch and pow, and you could hear the click of their beak. So I turned my kids loose with some BB guns, and that fixed their problem.
Well, that's, I can see that happening in my world as well.
Yeah, well, my kids are part of nature too. and my son definitely consumes his share of the natural world. Goodness, that boy eats. But anyways, all jokes aside,
is he the cutie that got stung not too long ago?
Yeah, he is the cutie that got stung. He gets his good looks from his daddy.
Yeah, and he does look like you.
He does look like me to a degree, but he's got quite a bit of his mother's. I never had blonde hair or that fair of skin. So, but he thinks it's great. He absolutely loves getting into bees. And if his eyes get swollen up, he actually has a really fun time with it. So I'm glad that he's amused by it. and he's quite a fun little kid, and he loves anything honey related, especially creamed honey. That's his favorite.
Well, I'll tell you, to have kids that'll stick with you and really and truly learn is great. I've got a passel. That's an actual term you can find in the dictionary. I have a passel of grandkids, and out of all of them that have been exposed, only one kind of was interested, and then we got to a teenager, and apparently girls are more popular than bees. So
well, it's hard to argue with that. However, I think it's for guys at least, it's the same thing that makes us interested in bees is what makes us interested in girls, because we can't figure girls out and we can't figure bees out, and that's why we stick around, because we guys like to think that we know things, and so we just sit around until we die not actually figuring it out. Um,
That's
I,
hilarious.
I
But
think it's
maybe more men need to be really looking at their, maybe more parents need to be getting their kids involved, boy kids involved, so that they have a better appreciation for women when they get there. Because you're not going to know what the end result, you don't know what's going to happen. You just have to go in every day with a prayer and say, I hope I understand.
yeah, I hope I understand. Well, and family, Jimmy, Kathleen, Laurel, it's my whole bee business revolves around my family. Laurel does so much of the business. I get a lot of the credit because I do the interviews. She just doesn't want to do them. I've asked and begged and pleaded, and she said no. And after 12 years of marriage, I say yes, dear.
Yeah.
And so you learn how to respond properly to these things. But she does so much behind the scenes. And Kathleen is grafting queens. She also can jar honey quite efficiently and label better than I can. And Jimmy's really good at it too. You would be amazed if you give them an opportunity to make enough mistakes and get the motor skills. A 6-year-old, he's older than that. He's fixing to turn 8 now, but he started labeling pretty heavily when he was 6 years old. And at this point, I would say he's better than most adults. But
Wow.
it's going to take about 60 to 70 jars messed up, labeled, to get him to that point, where he's got the motor skills.
Let's go
But
to family.
right, but you got to learn sometime,
Sure.
and you still learn at 6 or 7, and we pay him in honey. And with the price of honey these days on the small scale, I mean, this is starting to get expensive.
I was gonna say wholesale market, he wouldn't be making diddly, but
Well, exactly.
retail, retail, he's probably
Retail.
doing well.
We'll negotiate the next contract on wholesale.
You better watch out. That'll happen before you know it. So I love that your kids are involved. Not everybody's kids are interested. That's okay. That's
Well,
okay.
let me say real quick though, is that sometimes that's kind of how it works though. People, don't still go after the young people, because even if they don't work out in their teens or their early 20s, a lot of times the beekeepers that we get in their 40s, 50s, or 60s or late 30s are young men or women who were exposed to beekeeping in their teens. Maybe it was their grandpa, maybe it was their mother, whoever it was doing bees, and they got too cool for it. You know how teenagers get. And then they get busy, they get a job, and get a family of their own. And typically what I see a lot is once they kind of settle in a little bit with a household and maybe get a couple acres of land or something like that, then in their late 30s or 40s, they're back into bees again. And that's really important. Even if it takes that long for that investment to mature, those people do quite a bit. The person that got me into bees was one of those type of people. And so who knows, maybe some of your youngins will give it a decade or so.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Does Tennessee do ag valuation with bees? Do y'all have bees as one of your agricultural reevaluation for your taxes, land taxes?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't know that for sure. I've always had bees since I was 14, so my accountant maybe already does that. I just don't know.
Well,
I don't know.
It's a wonderful benefit. Texas started doing it. I want to say 2013. I could be wrong, maybe 15. And that's where families come in. That's why I went to that. As families, so often they get older, like you said, they were exposed when they were kids, and then somebody said, well, you own that 20 acres over there. You want a better valuation, your taxes to be decreased, get bees. And in Texas, it has pulled, we got a few beekeepers now that we didn't have before that was afforded for tax roll purposes. So, whatever gets a family involved, I'm all over it. I think that it's such a wonderful hobby. I call it our habit because it's really, God.
It can be. And my hope is, and you guys are part of this, is that the education can keep up with the increasing amount of hobbyists and sideliners that the industry is shifting to, and educate them in a way that within a couple years they're able to get themselves in a sustainable manner and a good system going for them. Because I would love to see our bee colony numbers go up and our beekeeper numbers go up. But education has to be there and ready and waiting for them, because I think a lot of people again get into this and they go, okay, well, bees are going to go out and forage themselves. Hey, look, there's flowers out there. They're blooming. They're obviously they're good because there's flowers.
Yeah.
And most flowers that are native to the US don't really perform for honeybees because they weren't designed for honeybees and didn't interact. And so, you know, maybe for bumblebees, carpenter bees, and other types of bees, they work. But a lot of times we see that here in Tennessee, and we're very lush. We get a lot of rainfall, and it doesn't matter. We had a really wet July, and it still is quite green. And even in August, where it's usually brown, a little bit, quite green. And, you know, the bees were robbing each other. You know, when we go into the bee yard, we'd have to be quick because they were robbing each other because they weren't bringing any resources in. So you had these colonies that were quite large. And, you know, part of what makes a honeybee really good at bringing in a lot of honey is going after it very strongly. And that tendency,
and wherever they can get it.
wherever they can get it. So there's a weak hive over there. They've got 20 pounds. Let's gang up on them, guys. And that's one of the characteristics about honeybees that I don't like, but we have to realize that, you know, they're not sitting there thinking, how can we get these guys? Yeah. It's more of just, it's all stimuli. And so the bees are like, the survival of our colony means that we need to do whatever we can to get nutrition for them. And so if that means bludgeoning the adjacent hive, we're going to do that. Sorry, guys, it's the circle of life, baby.
It is the circle of life. The strong survive. And, you know, I have tried my share of surviving weak colonies over winter, and it doesn't work.
It does not work. And you guys are in a much more mild area than most of the people in the US, but you guys have a long season. Mites can build up throughout your season for a lot longer than they can in the north. So there's advantages everywhere you go. I think one of the advantages of being further north is you have a shorter brooding season. And depending on where you're at, you might have more compact flows. So certain individuals that I know, their flow doesn't start really good until June. However, it goes June, July, and then it goes into the fall flow almost immediately. There's just very little gap. And then they start winding down for winter. And that's more, that's only a northern thing. I don't have that in Tennessee, but I view that as if you can learn how to overwinter your bees overwinter really good and control your mites, you're going to be in good shape, because you don't have 2 to 3 months of dearth where you have no nectar, very little to no pollens, and what you get are probably very poor quality pollens like corn pollen or something like that. And that's a rough period for your bees. Summer is our toughest season. If we can get them out of summer and get them into September and October with a good cluster of bees, we're going through winter, no problem with those bees. It's at the point now, after 21 years, if I go into my bees in October, I can tell you if it's going to overwinter or not. And I didn't used to be able to do that. But the advantage we have down here is we can produce more bees, we can produce more queens, and we can do some things that the northern beekeepers can't. That's why a lot of the bees that are made in the South.
That's right.
But we also make the mites.
Yeah, we make mites nonstop, because we don't stop summer. You know, we jokingly talk about the summer and then fake fall. And then we think maybe it's fall because, you know, there's leaves falling. Wait a minute, that's drought. That's not really fall. We kind of go these fake seasons, but I'm in a perpetually hot, dry area lately. We haven't had rain since end of June. We have not had rain. Literally had about a quarter inch of rain since the end of June.
Ooh.
Yeah. So our bees are not, although they're doing okay, but only because of our intervention. Like you said, you can't stick them out in a white box and just, you know, go here. support yourself in an environment like that.
Mm-hmm.
So talking about weak hives, do you have anything special you do to combine a hive? Maybe I should preface that.
Mm-hmm.
What are you seeing that's going to inspire you to combine or to, just make gone a hive at this time of year?
Mm-hmm. Well, so we're going through our bee yards. Actually, that's what I plan to do once this interview's over,
Okay.
and get back to the bees. But I came across a hive day before yesterday. Sorry. And as I was in it, I noticed that the queen was laying very poor patterns, and the colony was clean. And what I mean by that, I wasn't seeing European foul brood. I wasn't seeing high mite loads or anything like that. And I can mostly tell from the brood on Varroa. I also know when I've treated them last. And so I would feel comfortable combining this when the queen would need to go. It's really too late. It's middle of September. There's not enough time in my area to get a new queen in there and let her, build up the colony and get that going. It's time to combine. Take our losses now, store that equipment. And so that's a situation where I would combine. However, I came across a hive that was pretty infested with varroa mites also the other day. And so that's not when I'm going to combine to a good, healthy colony. I like that good, healthy colony just the way that it is. So what we did in that case is we always have some formic acid on hand, and it's definitely poor at this point. I'm not going to be able to salvage that colony. It's too riddled with mites. And so what I'm going to do as far as salvage it, let it fix itself. And so I dropped the full dose of formic acid. The weather actually has been the proper temperature range. I would probably do it even if it wasn't, because this colony is not surviving anyways. I need those mites dead so that that hive doesn't die and reinfest the whole yard. Because what can happen, as you know, is if we're in a robbing time of the year and this colony has 5,000 bees in it and all my other hives gang up, rob it. On those 5,000 bees, there could be 2,000 mites or 1,500 mites. I don't want that spreading throughout my yard. So I drop the formic acid, get them cleaned up. If I come back in a week to 10 days and I look, okay, they are still doing, they're alive in there basically at this point. The formic acid didn't cause them to abscond. And formic doesn't do that unless they're extremely weak or it's extremely hot. And so then I would combine that back. And the method that I would employ this time of the year would be the paper combine method. And it's using a newspaper. For those of you who haven't seen that before, let's say you have a double deep colony over here. And this is going to be your strong colony that's healthy. What we don't want to do during a period of robbing is add a bunch of bees just instantly to it, because it's robbing season, and so that means the bees are on edge. They're more defensive. If we were to do something like this, say in April or May during a nectar flow, the bees are so busy and happy-go-lucky. A lot of times you can combine a weak colony with a big one, and they just integrate.
Right. No newspaper required. Just throw them in there, and they get along.
Yeah, they get along really good. And so this time of the year, you got to do a piece of newspaper. So take some newspaper, make sure it's not a political side of the newspaper, because there's already enough parasites in the hive as it is. And you put that on there, and then you take a toothpick and put one on each corner of the box or something like that. Because if you have a newspaper and then you have a lid, where's the airflow? You don't want to be letting bees out of that new box that you combine and put on top of the newspaper. You don't want to let those bees out, but there does need to be some ventilation. So be sure, especially in hot weather, there's enough airflow. And what you'll do is just make some little slits into the newspaper. A good pocket knife will do this. And you don't want to make it to where bees can get through instantly, but you can just slit a couple holes in it to where they can get like their mandibles onto these edges of the newspaper and start chewing through that. And I prefer to have a little bit of sugar syrup involved. If the bottom hive has a frame feeder, then I would fill that frame feeder with about half a gallon to a gallon of syrup. And bees that have a lot of food in their bellies typically take everything better, whether it's queen introductions, whether it's combining bees back. And as the bees from up top over the next couple of days chew their way down through there, they're going to combine just fine. So that would be the method that's been used for who knows how long, and
Yeah.
it still works today.
It does. We've done it. I can't tell you how many times I've done it. Somebody on the webinar the other night asked about the newspaper method. Where do you get a newspaper anymore? Because it's like, you know, things aren't in print. And if anybody's wondering that, I truly go to like any convenience store and get the free Auto Trader or, you know, whatever, that free little magazine. And those are great. I mean, I don't have to spend anything, and it lasts for over a year in the amount that you use. So
go to your local farmers co-op and get one of them tractor ad newspapers and throw it on there. But you can probably substitute something like a parchment paper. If you can get one that's wide enough, you could do, you know, overlap it just slightly in the middle. But you would want to add some slits to that as well. And cheap, small amounts of parchment paper, you can get that at a Dollar Tree.
Yeah.
And get it a roll for a buck. So it's not too bad, but you should be able to find a newspaper.
Store. Nearly my favorite store.
Nearly.
It's just one of those places you can go and fill up a basket for $5, right?
Right.
So reducing hives, I get asked often about, well, you know, I built all year. I've got my 2 deeps. It's looking great. And really in their eyes, it's looking great. But if I were to look at it, I might have a different opinion. But if the space is too spacious, there's times when we can pull those back down. It's not a contest, right, of who comes out of winter with the amount of boxes. So what is your take on reducing down? You know, what are you seeing if you decide I've got to pull that top box off?
A lot of it's colony size. So if I'm going into colonies right now and I'm like, okay, they're only 5-6 frames strong, so pull that second box off. There's no point in it. They're not going to build up and need both of those boxes by the end of the year. So I'm pulling that top box off, make sure that we store that really good. You can use Paramoth. There's other products out there, but especially these brood combs, they need protected more than anything else. It's a lot easier to store honey supers than it is brood combs.
It is.
The pupal casings that's in the cells, the bee bread that's in there, especially, it's the proteins and fats that all of these wax moths and everything want. So we got to protect that, because next to the bees, the combs are basically our next important investment.
So true.
But when it comes to reduction, it really just depends on size. If they're going into the fall flow and they're over 10 frames strong of bees, well, then keep the double deep and you can come back later. A lot of beekeepers think, well, once you get to a certain month, there's no more inspections. And I'm not one of those kind of guys at all. If I go into some bees in December, because here in Tennessee, I'll get some 50, 60-degree days and I get bored. And heck, I can remember several times Christmas Day, just all I wanted for Christmas was to get into my bees. And it was 60 degrees outside. And so I did.
Yeah.
And I went into a couple of hives and I was like, okay, so you have an adequate amount of food, but it's kind of spread out actually. And so we're just going to come, and there's no brood typically at this point for me. If you run Carnies versus Italians in Tennessee, you'll get a brood shutdown, especially if they heavily favor the Carney genetics or Russian genetics, they'll shut down. And so we will not have to worry about chilling any brood, which is way more sensitive to cooler days than the adult bees. So if there's like 7 deep frames worth of food, I can put that all in the bottom box and then just stage that right in the center, shake all the bees down on that 60-degree day, and then remove that box. And especially since it's December, I, in my area, won't have to worry about wax moss and probably until about April. It's cool enough of a night. I don't have to worry about it. However, that reduction can be beneficial for the bees. They might survive with that box on it just fine, but the thermal dynamics of the cluster really benefit from that reduction in space. And I think the more that we study this, and the Canadians have done a lot, and other European countries on researching this because they have to. They're in an extreme cold area and they're trying to be very efficient with their extremely long winters, and they're overwintering singles up there. I know guys that overwinter singles in Vermont. I know guys that overwinter. Michael Palmer overwinters nukes in Vermont. Obviously, there's a method to the madness. However, if they can do that up there, why can't we do that in Texas and Tennessee?
Right,
So,
I agree.
so this whole double, everything has to be in a double deep is one of the things I will label as old fashioned and really not correct.
And it's just not necessary in every case. I mean, we probably overwinter majority of double deeps, but
Same.
you know, only if they can.
Mhm.
You're talking about Michael Palmer. I've actually met him before. Super nice guy, and
Yeah.
he does overwinter a lot of nukes. But he's very strategic. For anybody listening, you can do this. It's just a matter of how close you get them. We pretty much will just push them side by side so they can use each other as warmth,
Mhm.
and also do some sort of a heat escape prevention on top. We'll even put a dead space above the boxes, the nukes, the smaller,
Mhm.
weaker hives, in order for them to be able to do the thermal regulating like you've been talking about. Their clusters aren't this big, so they really do need help.
They do. And if that heat's going, if they're in the bottom box and all that heat's going a whole box up and it's not necessary, it's a lot of waste of energy. They're burning through more honey.
Exactly.
And obviously there's advantages to insulated hives, but there's also disadvantages with costs and various things. And I know you all sell Apame hives,
You do.
and a lot of beekeepers like that. I have 26 of them. They're very nice. They're well constructed. They're actually made with Texas plastic, from what I've been told, from the guys that sell them here at Apame. So basically, the plastic is produced like in Texas, and then it's shipped to Turkey, where they make them and they ship them back.
And they're
Um,
amazing.
it is, and so they're a good quality box. So the insulated hives do help the bees regulate and burn through less food, and also there's polystyrene hives. And so for those who are listening who want to get some advantages of insulation, though, the lid is the most important component. It's by far and away the most important when it comes to holding that heat in, and that's where the heat is lost. So if you're wanting to kind of keep it a little bit cheaper, look into just insulating under your cover, and that's going to help your bees out a lot. And I just really think that when it comes to overwintering our bees, let's get past this whole idea that there's a certain size, double deep, singles, nukes. Really, it's about quality. And Michael Palmer's only able to overwinter nukes in Vermont because those bees, and I've seen pictures, I've talked to Michael, they are ran at a very high level, and those are some very healthy bees. They have to. I mean, sometimes it'll be like 4 months before they get a cleansing flight. And those bees have to be extremely healthy.
I do.
And that does not happen by accident at a high level. So nukes, when we tried to overwinter them in the first couple of years after I learned that from Michael, I don't know when he really gained a ton of popularity, but I'd heard murmurings for a long time about Michael Palmer, and then finally he kind of got out there. I'm like, okay, well let's try to overwinter a few nukes, because if they can do it in Vermont, surely you can do it in Tennessee. Well, I found that I had a lot of trouble the first couple of years, even though I'm way more mild of an area than Michael is. We don't even have a real winter compared to what Michael has.
No.
And it's like we have 2 weeks of real winter. And I was born in Indiana, by the way, so
Oh, so you
I
do know.
remember some real winters. I
You know,
remember
go
drifts
ahead.
being taller than me. But anyways, what were you saying, Chari?
Well, Michael Palmer's double nuke system is what got us kind of interested in that overwintering. And I'm going to say, you said, I don't know when he really, his popularity, I will say it was then. And if I'm not mistaken, it was 14 or 15, 2014 or 2015.
It sounds about right.
That does, I think. And that Palmer double nuke system is really what it
Mhm.
boiled down to. And for those that don't know, it's Langstroth, but it's amended. It's been retrofitted to do 2 colonies side by side, and in that trickery, because that's really what you're doing, they actually will create a cluster to the center. Even though it's two nukes that are side by side, they will cluster this way, not independently in each nuke that has their own queen. They'll do it up against the center, which is really, it's just a cool thought of how the bees are thinking that that's part of them, even though they're not part of them. It's very interesting. But have you ever done the double nuke method?
I have not done the double nuke method. We're so mild here. I've just always ran them as they are. Now I will sometimes run them above a double screen board these days for advantages. So one thing I'd like to say real quick, why I struggled early on is because I didn't understand to a high enough degree the value of winter bees and how much die off. So, okay, let's say that it's right now and you're going into your bees in Tennessee and you're looking into this nucleus colony that you have. It's a 5-frame nuke and that's all there is. And it looks like there's about 5 frames of bees. Oh man, that looks really good. Well, that's not what you're going to overwinter on likely, because a lot of those bees are old forager bees and they're going to kill over. And depending on how much nutrition they have, you might only have 2 frames of winter bees because it's not that big of a population. Now, if they're given a lot of good nutrition, either from nature or supplemented from the beekeeper, then maybe that nuke could generate 3.5 frames of a cluster. That's still not ideal. Anything below 3 frames is really too small, in my opinion. And Michael's doing 2 nuke boxes over here, and then he'll do 2 over here typically, and they're 4 framers, so 4 and 4, 4 and 4 butted up against each other. And a lot of times he'll park those on top of a double screen board over a strong honey production colony, so that production colony is shooting heat up. They are providing their heat up there as well. And like you said, they're going to the center of both boxes to combine that heat, because they can detect those advantages on the thermodynamics provided from the other colonies. So he's really got this dialed in, but you have to have enough winter bees. And really, you can overwinter in a mild area, 3 frames of bees if they're really healthy and clean. That's not ideal. It really would be nice to have at least 4 to 5 frames minimum, if possible. And so, Michael having these healthy bees and having like 8 frames with these double nukes and 8 frames with these double nukes, even if those are condensed down in half, you still end up with 4 frames of cluster. And I dare say, from seeing a lot of Michael's presentations, he ends up with more bees in each one than that. So Michael's got a very dialed in operation and does a very good job and produces a lot of honey and has done it for a long time. As beekeepers, we have to realize that our bees have a tough row to hoe. There's more pests now than ever. I'm sure you've probably heard of the landfall of the yellow-legged hornet.
Notes from your live conversation
with Richard. Yeah. So hopefully they're going to crush that. They're doing their best to do that down there in Georgia. And I hope that if there's anything that they need, heck, if they need me to go down there with a flamethrower, I will do it.
Right.
And
right
so
behind you.
Somebody
said, I'm hoping I didn't see it, but I just saw a blip on social media that something was spotted in Florida.
Not Florida. I haven't heard anything about any new things in Florida, but they have everything down there. Anyways, I was just in West Palm Beach speaking, and it's like early morning, drink a cup of coffee. It's so nice to be down here. I've never been so far in the South, this tropical looking area. And all of a sudden this like 4-foot iguana jumps off of one limb to the other. I'm like, you know what? I think I'll watch from behind the glass. There's a gator over there. There's an iguana jumping from the trees over there.
Well, it's the price they pay for being the tropical wonder in the world, right?
It's gorgeous, and they were super nice, but it's super different than Tennessee and Texas. And those yellow-legged hornets, the European hornets that we already have, that have been here for like 100 whatever years, they've been here forever, basically already act like they've been here forever. And so these things are chipping away at our bees. They build up yellow jackets, hornets, they build up to these massive populations in fall. And that's when we need to be gearing up our best bees, and everything's at its biggest. Small hive beetles that are at their biggest at that point. If we don't take care of varroa, it's at its highest point later in the year. Then we also have the yellow jackets, the hornets. We have assassin bugs, and they're prepping for winter too. And then there's also robber flies, and there's all of these other creatures that they are programmed to do what it takes to survive. And honeybees, oh, by the way, not only are super nutritious, but they're usually in copious quantities. The beekeeper's got a hive over there with 40,000 bees. Where else are these creatures going to go and get that kind of buffet? And so as beekeepers, we need to realize that some years nature doesn't give us the best foods for our bees. And some years we have yellow jacket nests real close. Every year is going to be different. And if you want to have things dialed in at a high level, I'm not saying this to scare anybody, but to encourage them to be vigilant, because I find that the more work I put into my bees, the more work that I get out of my bees. There's a lot of things going against them. Us as beekeepers, we can be one of the things going good for them. So I think we're supposed to coexist and do our best. And that's what we try to do.
Coexist and do our best. That we need that T-shirt, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Right. And then have a bee on it going, thank you. I was enthralled by Richard Noel's. I couldn't shut it off.
Yeah, he does a great job.
It was so good. I don't know, maybe I'm on an island, but I actually came away feeling better about it after listening to him, because I mean they're like, been there, done that, and we're doing okay. So that made me feel better. We don't want it here, but in light of all the other bugs that are messing with our bugs, I expect that it's not the end of that story, don't you?
Absolutely. There were people who, when Varroa came over, they got out because there's like, you know what? The golden days are over. It's time to pack up shop. And then there's people who, when I was a teenager, 14, 15, 16 years old, like, get out of the business, kid. There's no money in beekeeping. I already wanted to be a beekeeper at this point. You know what? That's the best way to motivate me, though, is to tell me on my YouTube comments or something that I can't do something. It really is counterproductive if you're trying to. You have to use reverse psychology with me. Tell me that I can do something, then I might get complacent and lazy. But
that's how wives get things done, by the way.
That reverse psychology, is that how that works? Wow.
No, I shouldn't have told you that. That's our secret. Darn.
Wow, this makes sense now. I my life makes sense and it has meaning. So all jokes aside, there are always going to be the negative people who say that you can't, even though the Hornets, I hope they eliminate them in Georgia, and they're doing their best. The folks that crushed the Japanese hornet in Washington did a phenomenal job. It's very rare for them to control these things, but no matter if it's this or eventually something else is going to come over and cause our bees problems. If you read any history books, that happens. So we can choose to be the type of people that adapt and overcome, or we can get on out and go play golf. Right. And I'm not a golfer. They don't really make adult golf things my size. I have to go into the kiddie section so I can get.
I was going to say, I have a grandson that might loan you one.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's funny. I'll go speak at these places, and the kids are always the most honest. The adults, they've learned to be a little bit. They talk to you, and most of the time are very nice and give it to you on a silver platter, but not the kids. Oh no. And I was at a place speaking, and this 12-year-old boy comes up to me and goes, Kamon, I've watched a lot of your videos. You're a lot shorter than I thought that you were. It's like, wow, and he was like my height, but he was 12 years old. So obviously he's well on his way to being bigger than me, but he was still my height at this point. And I was like, hey, listen here, shrimp. No, I find it hilarious.
That is hilarious.
I want to be one of those people that sees these problems like the Asian hornets, and what can we do to
Mhm.
work together to figure it out. And thankfully, Richard is a good personal friend, but
Mhm.
also a good beekeeper. And you can tell in his interviews that he absolutely loves beekeepers and beekeeping and is very passionate about this subject. And so it's really nice to be able to learn what they're doing in France and over in Europe to combat this problem. And the Aussies are asking questions from Europeans and folks in the United States and Canada about how to deal with Varroa as that becomes probably their new norm as it seems. So I hate that for them, but beekeepers, it's a small community in the grand scheme of things.
Yep, in the scheme of
And
things.
and it's important that we communicate and help each other out because nobody else is going to.
Well, you got to have a love for this bug in order to really absorb it. I'm huge into the biology of not just the bee, but any of its other bugs, like the Asian hornet. I'm totally. It's just incredible. Its life cycle is just
It,
super interesting.
it is, but I also find how interesting tannerite does at blowing nests of this.
Tannerite. Hadn't
Yeah.
heard that in a minute.
Well, welcome to Tennessee.
Well, it's here.
I
We had neighbors that had we'll call it a shooting range on the weekend only, and
oh
Tannerite
yeah,
was their fun. So
I, that sounds pretty normal for any holiday or weekend around here as well. And that might be coming to a YouTube video in the future if those Asian hornets get up here and become a problem. Just wait for one of my YouTube videos to surface, and yeah.
there you go. Before we go, because gosh, it goes so fast. Time goes so fast. Let's just briefly talk about OA, oxalic acid. I'm a fan.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen your interview with Cameron Jack on that, and I'm so interested in the science part of it. But it's
It's like,
interesting.
see, you sure you're not talking to a PhD, right? So I can only
Well,
give you nuts and bolts.
I don't have that either. But the science behind it, my question mark, just beekeeper to beekeeper, is
Mm-hmm.
I know there's not a time frame of when we're going to up the dosing to be proper. I
Mm-hmm.
know there's no one that can know that. As a matter of fact, I even went yesterday and looked at the USDA, all of their information on it, and there's
Don't worry, Sherry. The government's on it.
that's the scary part, I think, is that there's really no telling when any of this is going to be amended.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at the extended release and everything, the lack of efficacy of that,
Mm-hmm.
we've got so many people going off the cuff and doing things that are not legal, technically legal to do for our bees.
Sure.
And shop towel, whatever you want to call it, the sponge. I've heard good things come out of Randy's research with them, but then you've got those that are really smart, like well, gosh, just Cameron. Let's just take him, pull him out, Cameron Jack, and he's saying virtually it's just not worth it, right?
Sure. Well, I've talked to a lot of different people about it, and some of them are academics like Cameron and Jack who've done a lot of research on it, and there's some of them that are more like commercial beekeepers who've gone cowboy on the situation and decided to do it anyways,
Right.
and run their own tests. And it shows you the sign, the way things currently are, though. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It's very frustrating. I consider myself a beekeeper first and foremost. I might do these interviews, I might run a conference, I might do these other things, but at the end of the day, if the beekeeping industry is not healthy or something's wrong with it, that affects me, my beekeeping operation, all my friends who by and large are beekeepers. So we have an issue in the treatment area. Varroa is a problem. It has been, and we're not gaining ground. We seem to be losing ground. If anything, we're gaining ground in some knowledge areas, but as far as options, we're not. And it's very frustrating. And especially as for the commercial beekeeper who may run 10,000 hives, if you're spending $8 a hive, That is a lot of money right there. It better work.
It better.
It better work. And some of these products are not working good enough. You need to be able to get like 90% kill, 80% kill. It needs to be uniform. And it's difficult. I understand that to a degree. There's temperature variables. But at the end of the day, there are people who are using products, whether it's strips or whether it's thymol or whatever it is, and they're throwing it in there. And if they're actually monitoring, they're finding, no, I didn't get 90%. I only got 73% this time.
Mm-hmm.
Or in some research with Apivar, they're finding it's not testing good anymore. And that's a problem because it was one of our more reliable treatments. This is a problem. And because if we can't control Varroa, we can't have uniformity in our bee operation. So getting to the oxalic acid, it's one of the newest kids on the block. And whenever something new comes in, everyone thinks it's a silver bullet, partially because they don't understand how it works.
Mm-hmm.
It comes into the country and people make assumptions because they weren't given a good bit of information. And unfortunately, what happened is we, especially at the bee club level, just started making assumptions on things. And some of it was based on information that we were given from people who should have known better. I remember seeing a specific article saying that 4 rounds in 21 days would eliminate 90% with oxalic acid vapor. That's not even close to the truth. Oxalic acid is a flash treatment. And I don't know. That's frustrating. I don't know how many treatments it would take to get 90% kill. I think it depends also on your mite infestation to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
There's also variables that we don't know. When it comes to vaporizers, how fast are they cooking the oxalic acid? Research is starting to show that it's not just about how hot it gets to degrade the oxalic acid, which then goes into like formic and other compounds eventually, but it's also how long it's exposed to that heat. So it could be lower temperatures, but if it's exposed longer, that could be problematic as well on the degradation of the oxalic acid.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of variables here with it. And beekeepers, especially the new ones, as the more experienced, the educators, we need to be able to give them a set of blueprints if possible. Like, hey, if you do this, this is going to give you these results, or very darn close. We don't really have that. And so, especially with oxalic acid vapor, a lot of people originally were going one treatment every week for 3 weeks will cover 7 days, and that will give you control. No. We have personally done for our operation 40 colonies to a yard, and we will do 5 rounds in 21 days. That was back when we were using a Provap. And we would never get even close to 70% kill. Most of the time we were in the 50s. Maybe some of the colonies would get up in the 60s on treatment. That's not enough. That slows the mites down a little bit. And that was using more than the legal dose. That was using double the dose.
And 2 grams. You were doing 2 grams.
2 grams per deep box at that point. Yeah. Now, I ran a test last year where we did 4 grams per deep box, and we did 5 rounds in an abbreviated period of 15 days.
Wow.
Trying to really crush that capped brood period. And where basically as the capped brood emerges, of course, the Varroa mites emerge with them as they're reproducing. So I wanted to crush that. So I brought it up to 15 days. And you know what? We got in the low 80 percentile range with that. But think about this. They were all double deeps. So that was 8 grams per treatment times 5, 40 grams per hive. That was a lot of work. It was August when I was applying these things, and I just about burned through my bee suit. And I couldn't hardly see through the respirator because of all the humidity and sweat. And so that was so fun. The problem is, and I had heard rumors about this, but I never experienced myself, at this high of a dosage, every single colony, it wasn't a couple, every single one of them had shotgun patterns afterwards. And these were good looking colonies. The mite loads weren't out of control either. When we started applying the treatments, the infestation was a little over 1.5%. So we wanted to let them get a little bit higher because we wanted to be able to actually kill mites. And so we needed to get them high, but that's not, you can come back from that if you deal with the mites quickly at that time of the year. And it gave us some control, but I think part of the reason it works so good is because it thrashed the brood so bad. It must have been killing young larvae. So I don't know what's the best for the bees. I don't know what's best for mites. We have to realize that even natural things like oxalic acid and formic, which are natural occurring in the hive, you get this in your food, other foods as well. I'm not worried about contamination to the colony comb long term, but how it immediately affects the brood is a problem. Cameron Jack will be speaking at our conference at the North American Honeybee Expo, and that will be exciting because I'm going to have him talk on some of the
Good.
latest and greatest information. He asked me what I want. I said it has to be earth shattering, and he's like, "Oh, no pressure, right?"
No pressure.
And so hopefully we'll learn some more things then. But what I can say that we do know about oxalic acid vapor is it works very good when the bees are mostly broodless or especially completely broodless.
Right.
And that's part of our strategy is to have these carnolians that want to stop brood rearing in November in Tennessee. And then we'll wait for those 50-degree days in November or December when there's no brood. And if it's 50 degrees or upper 40s, the cluster's not really tight. And then the vapor can permeate the cluster very good and deliver us a very good kill. So what we're going to do is come back and do that again. I go ahead and do it twice. When it comes to mites, a little overkill a lot of times is good. And I find 2 treatments to be best. I still don't trust it to give 90%. It may, but oxalic acid crystals are so cheap and mites cause so much damage, it's worth it. I know Bob Benny does 3 treatments in wintertime, and he feels like that's worth it. However, I will say Bob has guys like Seth to force them to go out there in the winter months to go and do these treatments for him, you know. But when you're running an awesome operation like Bob, you just Seth, go out there and treat those hives. And Seth's a go-getter too. So
We
what
all
a
need a
great
Seth. We all need a Seth.
we all do. The only thing the only time I wouldn't want Seth around is if I was having a barbecue and there wasn't enough to go around. I think he'd probably wear it out. But no, they're a great group of folks. So basically, long story short, oxalic acid vapor is something that I believe if you're going to use that as your main treatment, you need to be monitoring. And I think it's wise to monitor with any treatment. So there's 2 ways that you can go about this. The alcohol wash is the best method, where you would take a half cup of bees and you would euthanize them quickly. And that's 300 bees. And then you could get a sample and hopefully you don't see any mites. But let's say you saw 3 mites, that would be a 1% infestation. That's the highest you want to go into winter with, and preferably not even that. I would still treat at that point because anything that's in the brood is going to emerge out, and mites double about every 21 days. So you need to monitor. Another method you could do is use a sticky board. I don't really like this as well. However, what you can do is put one of the white sticky boards under a screened bottom board, or if you have an Apame hive or something like that, it already has an insert in that. And then you want to coat that with vegetable oil of some sort. And then you're going to use your oxalic acid vapor. And then you're going to observe 24 hours later how many mites have fallen down onto this. And if we're seeing 5, okay, that's not too bad. Probably go ahead and treat again, though, and then see if we continually get that 5. That probably means they're at a low level, but probably go ahead and keep hitting them until it lowers lower than that number that you're seeing. However, there are people that will use oxalic acid vapor in this circumstance, and they'll have hundreds drop, sometimes even thousands. And at that case, you will find that if you replace that sticky board and let the natural fall occur, they'll only fall heavily for like 2 days, and then there'll be a little bit of fall on the 3rd day. Some people are like, well, it's still killing over this period. Is it fresh kill, or is it mites that were damaged on day 1 that just took a couple of days to die?
I think that's it. Because I think it's contact kill. I mean, I believe it's contact kill, don't you?
I believe it's contact kill. If there is some kill that's not instant contact, it's very minuscule. And I think that's what kind of skewed our original thoughts on how it worked is we saw, okay, we treated and there's still mites dropping pretty heavily on the 2nd day. 48 hours later, and there's still a little bit dropping on the third day and a tiny bit on the fourth. So maybe it's killing for this many days. But I think it's just a contact kill, and some of them maybe don't get hit as hard and they take a little bit longer. And so I think if you're using the sticky board and you're seeing this and you replace it, what you're going to find, and people have found and posted publications on this, you treat one day and then you clean the board and you come back 3 days later and you treat again, it'll keep raining and it'll keep raining. And you can do this like 7, 8, 9 times and it keeps doing it. So I suggest anyone who's out there listening who wants to make oxalic acid most efficient, one, use it when your bees enter any type of partial brood break or a complete brood break, and sometimes make your own brood breaks.
Right.
A split that I did at the West Palm Beekeepers Association, I made a couple splits, but one of them I like to do is called a smart split. And commercial beekeepers have been doing shook swarms, making packages and stuff for a long time. The advantage is that there's no capped brood. So why not go into a colony of yours? If you can find some frames with no capped brood on them, it's just young larvae or eggs, put that in your split over here, maybe 2 frames of that, then shake a bunch of bees, shake 4 pounds of bees. So, just make sure you don't shake your queen in there. I usually leave the original queen in the original location. But now you can purchase a queen from the Bee Supply, shameless plug. And yeah, you can drop that down in there between those frames of brood. And before you drop the queen in there, though, treat it with oxalic acid vapor. And now every bee that's in there has been hit, and that new split that you made is very clean. And then you can treat the other hive differently because it has the capped brood. But this is a method that I use with my wife to get the new bees for the next year. And they always are our best looking bees because we wipe the varroa mites in them out. The original colony keeps the lion's share of them, and we get a new queen in there, and then we feed them really good. So great queens, dead mites, good nutrition. That's our recipe to success.
That and that we all strive for that. And the longer you're in beekeeping, anybody watching, they're thinking, oh gosh, will I get there? You will get there. It just takes time.
Yes.
Just takes time. So we got to wrap it up, Kamon. I could talk. I have so many more questions, but we'll just have to visit again another day. I want to promote the expo coming up. We are so excited. We're going to personally, the Bee Supply is going to have a fabulous 7 booths.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. I told Dirt Rooster we were going to do multi-level if you'd let me at the show. Have you ever seen
multi-level? Are you going to you want 2 stories? And people walk up to the top.
Is that okay?
Actually, we could totally do that. Randy McCaffrey won't be allowed to use the slide, but other than that, we'll be
Oh, I thought he was going to be the one helping us build it.
Well, he probably could. He does those kind of things, builds things. And nowadays, I think he's more ripping things up and getting bees out of it. But
that's for sure.
He's having just more fun.
Everybody knows the North American Honeybee Expo.
Mm-hmm.
It's coming.
It is. We already have, if it was held this weekend, there'd be like 2,200 people there. So we have 100, and actually we hit our 110th company last night. And a lot of the companies that I've added have been really unique ones. They've been from Europe. They've been some from Asia. And we've gotten a couple more from Australia and New Zealand. We have 8 Canadian companies. So we have a lot of unique products. I haven't really tried to add we have a lot of companies that are doing boxes and stuff. So I haven't really tried to add any more of those. But I have tried to get companies who are doing unique things, and that will be fascinating for American beekeepers and beekeepers all over North America and other places to really get to see a world of beekeeping. That's what I want. I built this honestly for myself because it's hard. It'd be hard pressed to find a bigger bee nerd than myself. And the trade show is a fun thing for me to be able to see all the bee gadgets. And I want people to be able to go in and go, wow, this is what this extractor looks like. Or, oh, this is the guy or the gal that runs this company. And now you can build a relationship or maybe not build a relationship, depending on how the relationship.
Or learn something you don't want to deal with.
Right. And I think beekeepers are kind of starved for that. We've gone through a transition over the last decade or so where things have shifted a lot in the industry. and the relationships between company and beekeeper. And that hasn't necessarily all been good. However, there's a lot of changes happening. And, I'm not doing this really to promote you guys just because you brought me on. I like Blake as a person. I like you as a person as well. Blake makes me really excited because when I got into beekeeping, it was a lot different. There was a lot. There seems to be more diversity. There also what made Man Lake, what made Walter T. Kelly, and what has ultimately has made every beekeeping company successful is the ability to understand the beekeeper, because most of the companies were beekeepers originally, and be able to connect with them and then know what they want and provide it at a high level and good customer service. And in this industry, you got to care. I was at Walter T. Kelly's facility in Clarkson. I think the building was built in the 50s. And we were going in there, and I was able to get to look at 1930 something catalogs from back when they were over like in Paducah area and go through these old things of, I wasn't able to touch a lot of it, but of Mr. Kelly's. But Mr. Kelly was a commercial beekeeper, and that's what Blake is as well. He was a beekeeper first, and now he's doing all this stuff. So it excites me to have people get in that are young like he is, that care about beekeeping like he does, and then build a company that targets what is going to help push beekeeping forward and make our lives better in the bee yard. So I appreciate you guys. I'm going to try to have all the things at the conference lined up so you guys can show your brand to everybody, and folks can go, the bee supply. That's Kamon's rival over there.
Which just may really work well in our favor, right?
Maybe so. Blake's got to do a couple presentations as well for us this year. And so, depending on how those presentations go, no pressure.
He's pretty good orator, isn't he?
He is. He'll be just fine.
Well, I want to get you at the booth. One of my and Blake said go for it. It's one of my plans is to one of the 7th booth that we have is to be a platform for Q&A, and I want to have you come sit down and do some live stuff from there. If I can get you for 5 minutes on
4.5. I'll carve out 4.5 for you.
That'd be great.
This year, I've got several awesome people who have stepped up to do a lot of the management for me. So,
good.
If nothing crazy happens, I should just be networking the whole time with you guys and people that are coming to the conference, because that's my number one thing that I want to do anyways, is thank all the good people who either take care of the industry like you guys do in producing products, and also the beekeepers who are such an important part of not just the conference, but our community. We need everyone from hobby beekeepers up. Some of these folks that are speaking are, sideliners, but they're running things at a very high level. And I think the future of our industry is really leaning strongly towards beekeepers that don't have 10,000 hives as much anymore. I think what we're going to see is 1,000 hives, 200 hives, some 400 hives, and a lot of 50 hives and 100 hives and 200 hives in that region as social media changes. And there are personalities out there who are building Facebook and Instagrams and TikToks, and for better or for worse, that's the age that we're in.
It is.
And you can, instead of selling honey for $4 a pound in a bucket, you now can build a presence, especially if you let your wife do it. They're usually a lot better at these things. I wish Laura would do it for me. And my daughter, though, she's a lot more extroverted. So
maybe that's your
so
what's coming.
Get Kathleen to go, buy our honey and enjoy the sweet life or something like that. Because if I do that, people are going to go, ooh, that's kind of that ugly guy promoting honey. I don't think so.
It's okay for our kids to be baked on honey sales. I've been doing that for a long time.
They got to earn their keep somehow.
Sure, they do. Of course.
But Kathleen already loves this quite a bit, and so maybe one day my dad will lose his job and she'll be doing some YouTube videos out in the bee yard. And
there you go.
And I think the era of people using these tools that we have, like these cell phones, I can go to a bee yard and, hey, this hive over here is doing this and all that kind of stuff. And then you educate thousands of non-beekeepers about honeybees. And oh, by the way, you sell honey and soaps on the side. And I think that's a valuable tool. So I think we're going to see a shift more towards that. So
I do too.
anyways, you and I can talk forever. I know I've talked your ear off.
You know
but
what, though? It really just took 5 minutes, but I know that the time doesn't say that. So tell everybody where they can sign up, register for the North American Honeybee Expo.
Oh, well, you can just easily type that in, probably just a North American Honeybee Expo in Google. There, we have a website. It's NAHBEXPO.com. And if you go there, we have several programs. One of the things I really want to say is we have a youth program. Now, I only have about 8 days left, but anyone that you all know, Chari, that's a young beekeeper, you're like, this girl or guy is really interested in bees, and it would be cool if they could get a full ride there. So we had a couple from Texas in the past, a couple of kids with our program. And this year I've got 30 spots for youth. So between the ages, I believe it's 11 to 20. And that is on the website as well. And all I'm asking is that they do a 2 to 3 minute video saying, hi, I'm, Billy, and I'm doing, bees over here in Massachusetts or whatever. And talk just a little bit about what they like about bees, what they like to learn, and just fill out the form. And if they get a spot, they're going to get a free ticket themselves, one for their guardian if they're young enough they need one, and then also we're going to reimburse. They get a check for their hotel. And so trying to get more young people involved. So if anyone out there knows anyone that's on the website, we have a honey swap. We'll be swapping. I estimate anywhere between 8,000 and 10,000 jars of honey this year. So
it looks like that. When I see the social media going on that it's just like everybody can't wait to do that.
It's kind of scary. It's kind of scary, to be honest. It's like a horde, just as long as it's
gonna be great.
Well,
it's going to be great. It's going to work like clockwork. You got a great team behind you.
Yeah. Well, it'll look like it's working with clockwork on the front end, and that's part of the illusion. Right. But hopefully we're not all going at behind the scenes at each other. But yeah, bring honey to swap. You can swap with some Canadians, some Hawaiians, even some of the people from Florida. What they have those crazy flows that they're fixing to hit a big Brazilian pepper flow, which is just not fair at all. So wow. If you love bees and beekeeping, if you're wanting education, if you're wanting to see basically all the products in the industry, if you're wanting to meet guys like my rival Blake, or the Dirt Rooster, or Bob Benny, or Chari, or myself, Mr. Ed, Frederick Dunn, Greg Burns and his stream team crew. We've got a lot of the cool people there. Natalie Summers is going to be doing a presentation. She's 15 years old, but she's already keeping bees as well as I was at probably 25. So she's really ahead of the curve on that. So if there's a lot of fun there. If you love bees, this is the place to be. And boy, what a shameless plug. What a shameless plug.
It is the place to be. And we'll be there, and it's going to be a great show. We'll plan a chat afterwards. We'll do a follow-up in February or something. And
if all goes well.
If all goes well, it will. Kamon, thanks so much for visiting with me again. I really enjoy our visits, and we'll be talking very soon, okay?
All right. Anytime. Thanks, Chari.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye-bye.